Good day to you. xProfessor here from Rounding Some Corners, also on TikTok. I want to ask you, how is it possible that a drug like marijuana, which was so illegal for so many centuries, putting so many people in prison, is now legal in the United States in 19 states? It's legal recreationally. How is it possible that black people born in the 1800s in Africa end up in a cotton field under forced labor conditions in the United States? How is it possible that babies who are seeking to have some nourishment in the 1960s are having to get their nourishment from a bottle instead of a mother's breast because the medical community, including Dr. Spock, a leading medical expert, is recommending against bottle use because it's harmful? All of those things are examples of doxa that have been overturned somewhat because the common public perception of them has been wrong and even immoral. And that's what we're taking on today. We're taking on marijuana as doxa. Doxa is a kind of knowledge that is assumed to be common among people. It's a kind of perception that's assumed to be common. It's an opinion that's assumed to be common. But the problem is, it's not right. It's not correct. It's not accurate. It's not contextual. And even worse than that, as cultural anthropologists have pointed out, doxa gets removed through systematic institutional actions that remove the subject from open discussion and criticism. So you can't discuss that babies should be drinking milk from a bottle. It's just assumed. It's doxa. And that's what has happened to marijuana. That's why, even though it is legal today in 19 states, recreationally in the United States, it's still illegal in 31 states. You cannot go out into public in these states and imbibe marijuana like people are taking in caffeine with coffee or people are taking in sugar with donuts. You cannot do it. And so in this video lecture, we're talking about the history of marijuana. In this installment, we're taking on an abbreviated history that's starting to get to why marijuana has this doxa even today, even though we have more and more leniency towards it. Even that term leniency implies that you have to tolerate it. We're taking on the history today, and the first notation that I want to make is when marijuana was actually written about. It was written about in 2800 BC, 2800 BC by a Chinese emperor, Emperor Nung, who also happened to be a leading expert on pharmaceutical herbs and spices that were in China. He's writing about marijuana's health properties. And then we also find notations about marijuana in plenty of other diaries and journals of Hindus and Assyrians and Greeks and Romans, mostly centered in the Asian part of our world. So marijuana was used almost universally, or at least was considered to have health benefits. Now, when I use the term marijuana, it's just a personal favorite. The actual name of the plant is Cannabis sativa. Here's the leaf. Marijuana to me is just a much more fun word. It's like saying sassafras or Timbuktu. Marijuana is a fun word to say, especially when you put a Spanish accent on it. Marijuana. It's got a humorous quality to it, at least to me. But not so humorous is a series of events and laws that took place, 3 of them in particular, which really served to cement marijuana's status as a dangerous drug, the incorrect doxa that I'm trying to get at. The first event was in 1936 with the release of a film called Reefer Madness. Reefer Madness was a film released, or financed, I should say, by a church group. And this film's premise was that high school students were lured by marijuana pushers, drug pushers, and into smoking joints. And once these high school people started to smoke joints, they started to engage in mayhem. They were committing suicide, jumping out of windows, committing murder, raping each other. You can take a look right here because I've got the trailer for Reefer Madness, and be prepared to have a good laugh.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe, or watch case.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide, and the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important film now, before it is too late.
Yeah, it's funny by today's standards because of how silly everything seems, especially to people who use marijuana. But in the 1930s, that film got extra wide distribution because a distribution film company picked it up and started sending it around as entertainment. The film did get revisited in the 1970s in movie theaters, drive-in movie theaters. I can remember going to a few. It became a satire for 70s stoners who looked at the film and laughed at how silly these people were in trying to present marijuana as they saw it. Anyway, that's the first event that really dealt a big blow to marijuana. The second event was in 1937 when Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act, which basically taxed marijuana out of existence. It was too expensive to use for anything in clothing or anything. So that was also a blow to marijuana. But the really big blow, the biggest blow of all, I think a lot of people would agree with, was in 1971, when Congress passed in 1971 the Controlled Substances Act, which broke down drugs into 5 different schedules, with the Schedule 1 drugs being the most dangerous, having no therapeutic or medicinal value. And guess where marijuana ended up? Yeah, on the Schedule 1 drug classification taxonomy. And so that means even today, businesses that are engaging in marijuana sales, they cannot compete on a level playing field with other businesses because they can't take advantage of interstate banking, and they cannot take their product across state lines. Warehouses in California cannot supply dispensaries in Nevada, for example. All of this, or much of it, I should say, is chronicled in a really excellent film called High Profits on Netflix. And this film is from 2015, and it depicts a young couple who had a medicinal marijuana dispensary in Colorado, and they converted it to a recreational facility when the law allowed that. And they had so many troubles financially because of this Controlled Substances Act, and they ended up carting around huge piles of cash because they can't use banking like regular businesses can. So the Controlled Substances Act was really the most evil law to attack marijuana and construct this doxa of it as a dangerous drug. Thankfully, though, in part because so many people knew better, like myself, and used marijuana for mental health, physical health, and other reasons, marijuana started to get examined by, you can say, individual experimenters, individual physicians, individual scientists, individual entrepreneurs. They wanted to isolate basically the properties of marijuana. So in 1996, we can say we kind of have a start to taking apart the doxa of marijuana. In 1996, we have individuals who are isolating properties of marijuana like CBD, like THC, like CBG, all of which you can find in dispensaries today as they seek to perfect the different incarnations of marijuana and what incarnations might be better for people depending on their symptoms and their afflictions or what they're seeking to achieve in their head. And so 1996 really started the slow repeal of the doxa of marijuana, but don't kid yourself, the doxa of marijuana as a dangerous drug is still out there today. You can't go out in public like a person who's drinking a cup of coffee and imbibe marijuana in a normal public situation, especially if there are young people around. You can't do that in the United States. It's because of the doxa of marijuana as a dangerous drug. even though there are countries where marijuana is completely legal recreationally, including Canada, the second biggest country in the world, to the north of the United States, Georgia over by Russia, Malta in the Mediterranean, Mexico, South Africa, and Thailand. These are the countries where marijuana is recreationally legal, but out of 200 countries in the world, that's not that many. There are still many countries where you're imprisoned or you can't get a hold of it. And so that's what we're doing in this video series. We're taking apart marijuana as Doxa, Doxa as a dangerous drug. Thanks for joining us.